Hello. So, no longer in my apartment in Sundsvall. I'm back home in the woods. I'm living in a wilderness area in Sweden, normally, and this is where I feel most at home, really. Although tonight there are quite a lot of mosquitoes and midges, but we have to live with that. I wanted to talk tonight about what non-duality is. Non-duality is the idea that there is only one reality. Now that in itself is not a strange idea or a controversial idea. In fact, I think if you would talk with most people, they would all have this intuitive feeling or idea or knowledge that, yeah, there is only one reality. It is something that can never be proven. But strange enough, we all have that as a type of a priori knowledge. So yeah, that's not strange. What is stranger is when we investigate the consequences of this idea more thoroughly, because that nobody does, of course, or very few people do. And to do that, we should maybe define or look a bit closer on what we mean by reality. What is a reality? What is reality? And what do we mean when we say that something is real? First, let's have a look at what would it mean if there were multiple realities. Let's say that we have two realities. These two realities, how would they interact, if at all? But the biggest question that immediately arises is, where are these two realities embedded in? The only answer to that is that they must be embedded in a third reality, which is a super reality. That must be itself the reality of both of these lesser realities. So then you're back to square one, because these two realities have a shared reality, which is the super reality, and then the statement there is only one reality holds. So let's assume, and for the argument, that there cannot be multiple realities. That automatically means that this one reality must be without bounds, limits, basically that it's infinite. Now, unfortunately, these words, boundless, limitless, infinity, they are all automatically connected with space and time. We're just wired like that. But if you think about it, this ultimate reality is the reality even of space and of time. So space and time are manifestations of this reality. They are embedded in it, and not the other way around. Although if it were the other way around, then one would call the space-time that ultimate reality. So that doesn't really make any difference for the argument. We're not talking about what it is that is the reality. Yeah. We're just acknowledging that there is only one reality. And we're going to look a bit at the attributes of this reality. One of them being boundless, limitless, or infinite. It is, I think, better, clearer if you think about that in the sense of this reality being beyond space and beyond time. that would better fit the situation that we automatically envision these words with space and time. So let's say this reality is boundless, limitless, it is beyond space and it is beyond time. So that means nothing can come into this reality from the outside, and nothing can go out of it, out of this reality. I mean, what would there be on the outside of an infinite reality? Now, it being boundless and limitless also means that it cannot start. I mean, where would it start in? And the same is true on the other end of the spectrum, it cannot end. Of course, start and end are concepts that have to do with time again, and this reality is beyond time. But still, for the argument's sake, it is nice to understand that a reality cannot start and cannot end. It simply is. It can only be. And in that sense, this reality is being itself. On the same note, there can never be a cause for the reality. The reality exists without cause. It is its own cause. And within it, everything that arises has only one cause. It is the cause that this reality is. I'm beginning to regret my choice of sitting here because the amount of midges is quite humongous. Anyway, in this sense, most people do not think about reality. The fact that it is beyond space and beyond time. But it is quite good to see it, or it is not wrong to say this about it, that this reality is everywhere. In fact, there is not a place where this reality cannot be. There is also not a time where this reality cannot be. And because this reality is basically beyond time, it is one big moment of now. Time has no meaning in this. So infinite is not like a stretch of time. The infiniteness is more like the eternal moment of now, of this reality. It is time itself that somehow takes shape within this reality. Now still, so far I think most people will follow the argument and say, well, what's the big deal? It sounds logical to me. And yes, it does. But when we then start to look at some other things, for instance, perception. Perception is the experiencing of things, with seeing, feeling, thinking. All those are perceptions. You have perceptions of the senses, the external sense perceptions. You have perceptions of the body, bodily sensations. And there are perceptions of thoughts. Those are subtle perceptions. Now, everybody would agree that what we see, like I see the midgets here, but what they would agree on is that maybe they're not here. I might be hallucinating and I might be dreaming, or they really are here. It's not a big deal, but there is a certain uncertainty in the objects of perception. Everybody knows this. Where there is very little doubt, or in fact it's beyond doubt, is that I'm aware of the perception itself, that I am aware of perceiving something. So what this means, what we mean to say by this, is that consciousness is real. We all say consciousness is real. There is something rather than not. And the fact that we are aware of this something means that there is consciousness. Now, if somebody would say there is no consciousness or denying consciousness, he would prove himself or herself wrong immediately to us, because we can hear him uttering his denial of consciousness by virtue of our own consciousness. So it is a bit of a weird argument there, but strangely enough, it is again something we cannot prove at all. It's just something we know. Again, an a priori knowledge, an intuition that consciousness is real. If we combine these two arguments, what is it that we mean by real? And what is reality? We come to a very startling discovery. That if we say that something is real beyond a doubt, on the other hand we say there is only one reality, then this thing that we called real must be that reality. Now this is interesting. So what we are saying is that consciousness is that reality. And that is indeed the premise of non-duality. Now often the way to this insight is grounded in that somebody is trying to find out who he or she really is, what he or she really is. And I'm not going into self-enquiry in this video, but after a process of steps where you intellectually, using the mind, remove all your belief systems and truly investigate from your own experience what you are not, the one thing that remains that you are is consciousness. Now this is not a strange thing either. I think most of the people would ultimately say, yeah, that's true, that what I call I, myself, is the one that understands, is the one that feels love, is the one that experiences beauty. It is the one that is hearing these words right now. And that is consciousness. So most people, with some effort and investigating their own experience, would come to the conclusion that what they really are is consciousness. What is not obvious, of course, is that this consciousness is not limited and personal. Our culture, our forefathers and everything have taught us that everybody has its own consciousness. And even worse, it is a belief. But what is more interesting in it is a belief that everybody on this planet seems to think that there is a huge body of evidence for. People think that there is a huge body of evidence that consciousness is an emergent property of the mind. But if you start to really investigate this and try to find what this evidence is, you will find that there is no such evidence whatsoever. And that makes it just simply a belief. So there is no real reason to hold so tight to a belief if there is absolutely no evidence for it. And if you lose that belief system, you actually become open to alternatives. You should not immediately exchange it with another belief. You shouldn't do that. You should just remain agnostic about it. And live your life according. You can do tests. You can say, okay, I'm going to act in my life as if consciousness is not limited and personal, and see what happens. But to connect the two arguments is then somebody would experience and would discover that what they call themselves, the I, is consciousness. And then with the logic of investigating their perceptions, they would find that the reality of perception is not on the objective side, but on the subjective side. So the reality of perception is consciousness. And if we connect that with the argument about there is only one reality, then it follows logically that this reality in perception must be that reality, the ultimate reality. So the revelation then is that what you really are is that one reality. So it is the insight and the revelation that what you are is universal consciousness. And this is the greater understanding of non-duality. First, there is only one reality, but from that there is a whole series of consequences, both logical and spiritual, that in the end reveals to you the fact that what you truly are is consciousness, and that consciousness is universal.